What started as the most beautiful day of Sarah Mitchell's life turned into a moment that would expose her closest friend's true colors in front of 150 wedding guests. The voicemail she played that evening didn't just silence the room, it changed everything about how she understood friendship, loyalty, and standing up for yourself. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who hurt us deepest. But what happened next at that reception in downtown Chicago proved that truth has a way of revealing itself when you least expect it. This is the story of how one bride's perfect wedding became the stage for the most shocking confrontation of her life. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell had dreamed of her wedding day since she was 7 years old, sketching dress designs in her elementary school notebooks during math class. Now, at 28, standing in the bridal suite of the historic Palmer House Hotel in Chicago, she was finally living that dream. Her auburn hair was perfectly styled in an elegant updo, adorned with her grandmother's pearl hairpins, and her emerald green eyes sparkled with joy as she adjusted the delicate lace sleeves of her custom-designed gown. The date was September 15, 2024, and everything had fallen into place exactly as Sarah had envisioned. She worked as a marketing director for a sustainable fashion company, and her attention to detail showed in every aspect of this celebration. The flowers were locally sourced white peonies and eucalyptus. The menu featured ingredients from Illinois farms, and even the wedding favors were small potted herbs that guests could take home to plant. Her fiancé, Michael Thompson, was a 30-year-old architect who shared her values and her vision for their future together. They had met 3 years earlier at a charity event for urban gardening, bonding over their shared passion for environmental sustainability and their love of weekend farmers' market visits. Michael was the kind of man who remembered the exact date of their first conversation and still brought her coffee every morning, prepared exactly the way she liked it with oat milk and a dash of cinnamon. But today wasn't just about Sarah and Michael. Like many brides, Sarah had chosen her closest friends to stand beside her, and at the center of that group was Jessica Chen, her maid of honor and best friend since their freshman year at Northwestern University. Jessica, 27 with long black hair and warm brown eyes, had been Sarah's roommate, study partner, shopping companion, and the person she called during every major life event for the past decade. Jessica worked as a social media manager for a lifestyle brand, and she had an innate understanding of how to make moments feel special and shareable. She had helped plan Sarah's bachelorette party in Napa Valley, organized the bridal shower that perfectly captured Sarah's aesthetic, and had been the voice of reason during every wedding planning stress moment over the past 18 months. The stakes for this day couldn't have been higher for Sarah. Not only was this her wedding, but her parents had flown in from Portland, Michael's family had traveled from Boston, and several colleagues and clients were attending. Sarah's father, Robert, was battling early-stage Parkinson's disease, and walking her down the aisle might be one of the last major physical milestones he could participate in fully. Her mother, Linda, had spent months helping coordinate details, despite managing her husband's care and her own demanding job as a high school principal. As Sarah stood in that bridal suite, adjusting her great-grandmother's wedding ring that she wore on her right hand for luck, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Everything seemed perfect. The September weather was crisp and clear. The photographer was capturing beautiful moments, and her wedding party looked stunning in their dusty rose bridesmaid dresses. What Sarah didn't know was that Jessica had been harboring a secret for the past 6 weeks. A secret that she had been planning to reveal in a way that would shift all attention to herself. Jessica was 12 weeks pregnant with her boyfriend David's baby, and she had been waiting for what she considered the perfect moment to make her announcement. In Jessica's mind, Sarah's wedding reception, with all their friends and family gathered together, presented the ideal opportunity to share her news with everyone at once. The irony was devastating. Jessica had spent weeks listening to Sarah stress about every detail, from the font choice on the programs to the exact shade of lipstick she would wear for photos. She had held Sarah's hand through moments of wedding planning anxiety, reassured her when vendors fell through, and promised that this day would be perfect and entirely about celebrating Sarah and Michael's love. But Jessica had already decided that she would use Sarah's special day as the backdrop for her own major life announcement. She had even planned exactly when she would do it, right after the first dance, when everyone would be feeling emotional and celebratory, when phones would be out to capture the moment, and when the energy would be perfect for a surprise that would generate the kind of social media content that Jessica lived for. If you're enjoying this story so far, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the like button. We share stories about real-life situations that test our relationships and teach us about ourselves. Your support means everything to us. To understand how devastating Jessica's betrayal would become, you need to understand the foundation of their friendship and the months of preparation that led to this moment. Sarah and Jessica's relationship had been built on what seemed like mutual support, shared experiences, and genuine affection that had sustained them through college. Early career struggles, relationship challenges, and all the transitions of their 20s, they had met during orientation week at Northwestern University in September 2015. Sarah was studying marketing with a focus on sustainable business practices, while Jessica was pursuing communications with a concentration in digital media. They were assigned to the same dorm floor in Willard Residential College, and their friendship began when Jessica helped Sarah set up her printer during the first week of classes. That small act of kindness blossomed into a friendship that would define both of their college experiences. They studied together at the library until closing time, shared midnight pizza deliveries during finals week, and spent countless hours talking about their dreams for the future. Jessica was the friend who brought Sarah soup when she had the flu, who helped her practice presentation speeches, and who stayed up until 3 a.m. helping her finish a marketing campaign project that was worth 30% of her grade. After graduation in May 2019, they both moved to Chicago, sharing a 2-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park while they started their careers. Sarah landed her position at Green Thread Marketing, a company that specialized in promoting sustainable fashion brands, while Jessica found her role at Lifestyle Labs, a digital marketing agency that managed social media for wellness and beauty brands. Their apartment became a gathering place for their friend group. Sarah loved to cook, often experimenting with recipes she found in environmental magazines that featured seasonal, local ingredients. Jessica had a talent for creating the perfect atmosphere, knowing exactly how to arrange candles, select music, and capture Instagram-worthy photos of their dinner parties and game nights. When Sarah met Michael at that charity event in October 2021, Jessica was the first person she called afterward. Jessica spent an hour on the phone with Sarah, analyzing every detail of their conversation, helping her craft the perfect follow-up text, and celebrating when Michael responded within 2 hours with an invitation to get coffee that weekend. Jessica was equally invested in the development of Sarah's relationship. She helped Sarah choose outfits for early dates, offered advice when Sarah and Michael had their first disagreement, and was genuinely excited when Michael started spending more time at their apartment. When Sarah and Michael decided to move in together after 18 months of dating, Jessica threw Sarah a moving-in-together party complete with customized napkins and a playlist of love songs. The engagement happened on a Saturday morning in March 2024. Michael had planned what seemed like a casual trip to the Lincoln Park Zoo, one of the places where they had spent many early dates walking and talking about their dreams. He proposed near the penguin exhibit, which had become their favorite spot because Sarah always laughed at the penguins waddle and Michael loved watching her genuine joy at simple moments. Jessica was the second person Sarah called, right after her parents. She screamed with excitement, immediately began asking about ring details, and showed up at Sarah and Michael's apartment within an hour with champagne and a notebook to start preliminary wedding planning. That notebook would grow into a comprehensive planning system that Jessica helped maintain throughout the 18-month engagement period. The maid of honor selection was never really a question. Jessica had been Sarah's closest friend for nearly a decade, had supported her through every major life transition, and had the organizational skills and creative vision to help make Sarah's wedding dreams come true. When Sarah asked Jessica to be her maid of honor during a dinner at their favorite restaurant in April 2024, Jessica cried happy tears and immediately started talking about bachelorette party ideas. What followed was 18 months of intensive wedding planning that showcased what appeared to be Jessica's complete dedication to making Sarah's day perfect. Jessica created a shared Pinterest board with over 200 pins of inspiration photos. She accompanied Sarah to 12 different wedding dress appointments, offering honest feedback and moral support during the sometimes overwhelming process of finding the perfect gown. She helped Sarah interview photographers, taste test menu options at 3 different venues, and make decisions about everything from invitation fonts to ceremony music. The bachelorette party in Napa Valley in July 2024 was Jessica's masterpiece. She had coordinated transportation, accommodations, restaurant reservations, and wine tasting appointments for 8 women over 3 days. She had even created custom t-shirts for the group and arranged for a professional photographer to capture key moments. The weekend was exactly what Sarah had wanted: elegant, fun, and focused on celebrating friendship rather than wild partying. Jessica's social media documentation of the bachelorette party generated hundreds of likes and comments. She had an instinct for capturing the perfect shots, candid moments of laughter during wine tastings, artistic photos of their dinner spreads, and group shots that looked effortlessly styled but were actually carefully composed. Her posts about Sarah's upcoming wedding consistently received more engagement than her usual content. Throughout the engagement period, Jessica seemed genuinely invested in every detail of Sarah's wedding vision. She helped Sarah create a seating chart that would facilitate good conversations and minimize family drama. She attended flower arrangement appointments and offered opinions on centerpiece heights. She even helped Sarah practice her vows, listening to multiple drafts and offering suggestions for emotional impact and clarity. But looking back, there were subtle signs that Jessica was becoming increasingly focused on her own role in the wedding rather than Sarah's experience as the bride. Jessica had strong opinions about photographer angles during the ceremony, insisting on specific positioning that would ensure she was prominently featured in key shots. She had requested a special moment during the reception where she could give a toast as maid of honor, emphasizing how important it was to her to have that spotlight moment. Jessica had also been particularly interested in the wedding's social media potential. She had suggested hiring a videographer specifically to create Instagram-ready content, had coordinated matching hairstyles for the bridesmaids that would look cohesive in photos, and had created a custom hashtag for the wedding that she promoted on her own social media accounts in the weeks leading up to the event. During the final month before the wedding, Jessica seemed more excited than ever. She posted countdown stories on Instagram, shared behind-the-scenes photos from dress fittings and final planning meetings, and talked constantly about how amazing the wedding was going to be. Sarah interpreted this enthusiasm as Jessica's genuine excitement for her happiness, never suspecting that Jessica was building anticipation for her own moment in the spotlight. The night before the wedding, during the rehearsal dinner at a charming Italian restaurant in Little Italy, Jessica gave a heartfelt speech about her friendship with Sarah. She talked about their college memories, their adventures as roommates, and how proud she was to see Sarah marry someone who truly appreciated her kindness and intelligence. She ended the speech by saying she couldn't wait to celebrate Sarah and Michael properly at the reception. Sarah went to bed that Thursday night, feeling incredibly grateful for Jessica's friendship and support. She had no idea that Jessica was 12 weeks pregnant and had been planning for 6 weeks to announce that pregnancy during Sarah's wedding reception. She had no idea that Jessica had already crafted the perfect social media post to accompany her announcement, complete with a caption about how excited she was to start her own family journey. Most devastatingly, Sarah had no idea that just 2 weeks earlier, Jessica had left a voicemail on her college friend Amanda's phone. A voicemail that revealed Jessica's true feelings about Sarah's wedding and her own motivations for the pregnancy announcement she was planning. But what happened next would expose everything Sarah thought she knew about her closest friendship, and it would happen in front of 150 guests who had gathered to celebrate love, commitment, and new beginnings. The ceremony itself was everything Sarah had dreamed of. The Palmer House Ballroom was transformed with white peonies and eucalyptus, creating an elegant garden atmosphere despite being in the heart of downtown Chicago. Sarah's father walked her down the aisle with steady steps, his Parkinson's symptoms barely noticeable in the moment, and her mother watched with tears streaming down her face. Michael's reaction when he saw Sarah approaching was captured perfectly by their photographer. Pure joy mixed with overwhelming emotion. Jessica performed her maid of honor duties flawlessly during the ceremony. She held Sarah's bouquet during the ring exchange, arranged Sarah's dress train perfectly for photos, and smiled radiantly throughout the 30-minute service. To anyone watching, she appeared to be the picture of a supportive best friend, genuinely thrilled to witness Sarah's marriage to Michael. The cocktail hour immediately following the ceremony was magical. Guests mingled on the hotel's rooftop terrace, enjoying signature cocktails named after Sarah and Michael's favorite shared activities, the farmer's market mule and the architecture tour. The September weather was perfect, with golden hour lighting that made every photo look professionally styled. Sarah and Michael spent the cocktail hour moving from group to group, thanking guests for traveling to celebrate with them and soaking in the joy of the moment. Sarah's dress felt comfortable despite its intricate beading, and she felt beautiful and confident as she hugged relatives she hadn't seen in months and introduced Michael's family to her college friends. Jessica was in her element during cocktail hour. As maid of honor, she naturally became a focal point for many photos, and she seemed to instinctively know how to position herself for the best lighting and angles. She posted several Instagram stories throughout the hour, each one showing different aspects of the celebration while building anticipation for the evening ahead. But Jessica was also using cocktail hour for a different purpose. She was subtly gauging the guest list, identifying key people who would provide the best audience for her pregnancy announcement. She made mental notes about where Sarah's family members were seated, which college friends had the biggest social media followings, and which guests would be most likely to react enthusiastically to surprising news. When the guests moved into the main ballroom for dinner and dancing, the evening's energy shifted into celebration mode. The room looked stunning, with round tables decorated with low floral arrangements that allowed for easy conversation, warm lighting that created an intimate atmosphere, and a dance floor positioned perfectly for both dinner entertainment and later dancing. Sarah and Michael's first dance was to "At Last" by Etta James, a song they had chosen because Michael had sung it to Sarah during a car ride early in their relationship, making her laugh with his intentionally dramatic performance. As they swayed together in the center of the dance floor, surrounded by the soft glow of string lights and candles, Sarah felt overwhelmed with happiness and gratitude. The dinner service proceeded smoothly, with the locally sourced menu receiving compliments from multiple guests. Sarah's parents seemed to be enjoying themselves, with her father managing his symptoms well and her mother finally relaxing after months of wedding planning stress. Michael's family was charming and warm, telling Sarah stories about Michael's childhood that made her love him even more. Jessica gave her planned maid of honor toast during dinner, and it was beautifully crafted. She talked about meeting Sarah in college, about watching her grow into an incredible woman, and about how perfect Michael was for her. She made guests laugh with a story about Sarah's obsession with sustainable fashion, leading her to wear the same vintage dress to 4 different events because it was too beautiful and ethically made to waste. She made them tear up by describing Sarah's loyalty and kindness to her friends. The toast was exactly what a maid of honor speech should be: personal, heartfelt, and completely focused on celebrating the bride and groom. But as Jessica sat down to applause and smiled at Sarah's grateful face, she was already preparing for her real moment. She had planned to wait until after dinner, when guests would be relaxed from wine and good food, when the energy would be celebratory, and when she could capture maximum attention and social media content. The moment came at 9:15 p.m., just as the DJ was preparing to invite guests to the dance floor after dinner. Jessica stood up from her seat at the head table, tapped her champagne glass to get attention, and began speaking before anyone could stop her. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Jessica said, her voice carrying easily across the ballroom as conversations died down and all eyes turned to her. "But I have some exciting news that I just can't keep to myself any longer, and I wanted to share it with all the people I love most." Sarah felt a cold chill run down her spine. Something about Jessica's tone, about the timing, about the way Jessica was smiling felt wrong. She looked at Michael, who raised his eyebrows with concern, clearly also sensing that something was off. "As many of you know," Jessica continued, now clearly enjoying the attention of 150 people, "I've been waiting for the right moment to share something really special. And I can't think of a more perfect time than tonight, surrounded by family and friends, celebrating love and new beginnings." The ballroom was completely silent now. Even the catering staff had stopped moving, sensing the tension in the room. Sarah's heart was racing, but she couldn't quite comprehend what was happening. "David and I are expecting our first baby," Jessica announced, placing her hand on her still flat stomach and beaming at the crowd. "I'm 12 weeks along, and we couldn't be more excited to start this journey." The reaction was immediate, and exactly what Jessica had hoped for. Several guests gasped with surprise and delight, others began clapping, and people started standing up to congratulate Jessica. David, who had been sitting at a nearby table, looked shocked, but pleased, as guests turned to congratulate him as well. But Sarah felt like the world had stopped moving. She sat frozen in her chair, watching her maid of honor accept congratulations and hugs from wedding guests, watching people take out their phones to capture the moment, watching her own wedding reception transform into Jessica's pregnancy announcement party. Michael reached over and took Sarah's hand, squeezing it tightly. He could see the shock and hurt in her eyes, could sense that this moment was devastating her even though he didn't fully understand why yet. Sarah's mother, Linda, looked horrified. She understood immediately what had just happened and could see the pain on her daughter's face. Sarah's father seemed confused by the shift in energy, but could sense that something was wrong. As Jessica accepted congratulations and posed for photos with her hand on her belly, Sarah excused herself from the head table. She walked quickly toward the ballroom's side exit, fighting back tears and trying to process what had just happened. In the hallway outside the ballroom, Sarah finally allowed herself to feel the full impact of Jessica's announcement. Her best friend, her maid of honor, the person she had trusted with every detail of her wedding planning, had just hijacked her wedding reception to announce her own pregnancy. In front of Sarah's family, Michael's family, their friends, and their colleagues, Jessica had shifted all attention away from Sarah and Michael's marriage celebration and onto her own life event. Michael found Sarah in the hallway within minutes, still in shock but now also angry on her behalf. "Sarah, I can't believe she just did that," he said, pulling her into his arms. "This is supposed to be our day, our celebration." Sarah started crying then, not just from sadness, but from a complicated mix of emotions she couldn't even name. She felt betrayed, humiliated, confused, and angry all at once. She couldn't understand how Jessica, who had spent 18 months helping plan every detail of this day, could have thought it was appropriate to make such an announcement at Sarah's wedding. "I don't understand," Sarah said to Michael, her voice shaking. "Why would she do this? Why today? Why here?" But as Sarah stood in that hallway, crying in her wedding dress while her reception continued without her, she had no idea that she was about to discover evidence that would make Jessica's betrayal even worse than she could have imagined. Sarah's college friend Amanda Morrison had traveled from Denver for the wedding, and she had witnessed Jessica's announcement with growing anger and disbelief. Amanda knew something that Sarah didn't know yet, something that would change everything about how Sarah understood Jessica's actions and motivations. 2 weeks earlier, Jessica had left a voicemail on Amanda's phone, a voicemail that revealed Jessica's true feelings about Sarah's wedding and her calculated plan to use Sarah's special day for her own purposes. Amanda had been debating whether to tell Sarah about the voicemail, not wanting to hurt her friend or create drama, but Jessica's announcement at the reception had made Amanda's decision for her. Amanda found Sarah and Michael in the hallway and asked if she could speak to Sarah privately. What she was about to reveal would transform Sarah's hurt and confusion into a clarity that would give her the strength to take action that would shock everyone in that ballroom. Amanda Morrison had known both Sarah and Jessica since their sophomore year at Northwestern, when she lived in the same residence hall and often joined their study groups and weekend activities. Unlike Sarah, Amanda had maintained a more casual friendship with Jessica over the years, which meant she sometimes saw sides of Jessica's personality that Sarah missed or overlooked. Amanda was a natural observer, the kind of person who noticed inconsistencies in people's behavior and remembered details that others forgot. She worked as a data analyst for a healthcare company in Denver, and her professional training in pattern recognition extended to her personal relationships as well. Over the years, Amanda had noticed that Jessica had a tendency to center herself in other people's important moments. During college, Jessica had announced her acceptance to a prestigious summer internship at someone else's birthday party. She had revealed that she was dating a guy from their study group during another friend's going-away celebration. She had a pattern of using other people's gatherings as opportunities to share her own news, always claiming it was spontaneous, but often seeming calculated in her timing. Amanda had also observed that Jessica's social media presence was carefully curated to position herself as the most successful, most interesting person in their friend group. Jessica's Instagram posts about her job, her travels, and her relationships were always perfectly timed to coincide with other people's major announcements, as if she was competing for attention and validation. But Amanda had never said anything about these observations, because they seemed relatively harmless and because Sarah clearly loved and trusted Jessica deeply. Amanda didn't want to be the friend who created drama or questioned Sarah's closest relationship without serious cause. That changed 2 weeks before Sarah's wedding, when Amanda's phone rang at 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday night, displaying Jessica's name on the caller ID. Amanda was already in bed and let the call go to voicemail, planning to call Jessica back the next day. When she listened to the message the following morning, she was shocked by what she heard. The voicemail was nearly 4 minutes long, and Jessica had clearly been drinking. Her voice was slurred, her tone was bitter, and her words revealed feelings about Sarah that completely contradicted the supportive best friend role she played in person and on social media. "Amanda, it's Jessica," the voicemail began. "I know it's late, but I'm just so frustrated and I needed to talk to someone who would understand. I'm so tired of everything being about Sarah and her perfect wedding. Do you know how exhausting it's been pretending to care about centerpiece heights and whether the napkins match the bridesmaids' dresses? I've spent 18 months of my life helping her plan this wedding, and for what? So she can be the center of attention for one more day?" Amanda had been shocked by the venom in Jessica's voice, but the voicemail continued and became even more revealing. "She acts like she's so special because she found Michael and they're getting married, but honestly, it's not that impressive. Plenty of people get married. It doesn't make her better than the rest of us. And all this sustainable wedding nonsense, like she's saving the world by using local flowers. It's so pretentious." The voicemail paused, and Amanda could hear Jessica taking a drink of something before continuing. "Well, I have news too, and I'm not going to wait for Sarah to finish being the princess to share it. David and I are having a baby, and I'm going to announce it at her reception. Let's see how she likes sharing the spotlight for once. I've been the supporting character in her story for too long." Amanda had listened to that voicemail 3 times, unable to believe what she was hearing. The Jessica in that message was completely different from the Jessica who posted loving tributes to Sarah on Instagram, who organized bachelorette parties, and who appeared to be genuinely excited about Sarah's wedding. But the most disturbing part was Jessica's calculated plan to announce her pregnancy at Sarah's reception. It wasn't spontaneous joy that she couldn't contain. It was a deliberate decision to upstage Sarah on her wedding day, motivated by jealousy and resentment that Jessica had been hiding for months. Amanda had spent 2 weeks debating what to do with this information. She considered calling Sarah before the wedding to warn her, but she worried about creating unnecessary drama and stress during an already overwhelming time. She considered confronting Jessica directly, but she doubted Jessica would admit to leaving such a revealing voicemail or change her plans. Ultimately, Amanda decided to attend the wedding and see what happened, hoping that maybe Jessica would reconsider her plan or that Amanda was misunderstanding the situation. She brought her phone with her to the reception, with Jessica's voicemail saved and ready, just in case she needed to act. When Jessica stood up to make her pregnancy announcement during Sarah's reception, Amanda felt sick to her stomach. She watched Sarah's face change from confusion to shock to hurt, and she knew she couldn't stay silent any longer. Jessica's actions were exactly as calculated and cruel as her voicemail had revealed them to be. Finding Sarah and Michael in the hallway outside the ballroom, Amanda felt nervous but determined. She had never been in a situation like this before, but she couldn't let her friend continue to suffer without knowing the truth about Jessica's motivations. "Sarah," Amanda said gently, "I need to tell you something about Jessica, and it's going to be hard to hear. But you deserve to know what kind of person you've been trusting with your friendship." Sarah looked at Amanda with red-rimmed eyes, still trying to process what had just happened in the ballroom. "What do you mean?" she asked. Amanda pulled out her phone and navigated to her voicemail messages. "2 weeks ago, Jessica called me drunk and left a message. She said things about you and your wedding that I think you need to hear. She also admitted that announcing her pregnancy tonight wasn't spontaneous. She planned it specifically to upstage you." Sarah stared at Amanda in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" "I have the voicemail," Amanda said quietly. "Do you want to hear it?" Sarah looked at Michael, who nodded encouragingly. She needed to understand what was happening, even if it was going to hurt. Amanda played the voicemail on speaker, and Sarah listened in growing horror as Jessica's true feelings about her wedding, her friendship, and her character were revealed in Jessica's own slurred but unmistakable voice. When the voicemail ended, Sarah was shaking. The betrayal was so much deeper than she had realized. Jessica hadn't just made a poor decision in the moment. She had been harboring resentment and jealousy for months, possibly years. She had spent the entire engagement period pretending to be supportive while actually finding Sarah's happiness irritating and burdensome. "I trusted her with everything," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She helped me plan this entire wedding. She was supposed to be my best friend." Michael was furious on Sarah's behalf, but he was also practical. "Sarah, what do you want to do? We can go back in there and finish our reception, or we can leave. Or we can handle this however you want to handle it." Amanda felt terrible for being the messenger, but she also felt angry about Jessica's manipulation. "Sarah, I'm so sorry you had to hear that, but I couldn't let her get away with treating you this way. Everyone in that ballroom thinks she's your loving best friend who just got caught up in the excitement of the moment. They have no idea how calculated this was." Sarah stood in that hallway for several minutes, processing the complete destruction of a friendship she had treasured for nearly a decade. Everything she thought she knew about Jessica was a lie. Every moment of wedding planning support had been fake. Every expression of excitement and love had been performance. But as Sarah processed the betrayal, she also felt something else emerging: anger. Not just hurt, but fury at being manipulated and used. Fury at having her wedding day hijacked by someone she had trusted completely. Fury at the thought of Jessica receiving congratulations and praise from their mutual friends for news she had strategically timed to overshadow Sarah's marriage. "I want everyone to know the truth," Sarah said finally, her voice stronger than it had been since Jessica's announcement. "I want them to hear exactly who Jessica really is and what she really thinks of me." Michael looked concerned. "Sarah, are you sure? Once you do that, there's no going back." "She already made sure there was no going back," Sarah replied, her voice hardening with resolve. "She ended our friendship the moment she decided to use my wedding as her personal stage. If she wants to play games with people's emotions and manipulate situations for her own benefit, then she can deal with the consequences." Amanda offered to leave if Sarah wanted to handle the situation privately, but Sarah asked her to stay. She was going to need the support of her real friends to get through what she was about to do. What Sarah didn't realize yet was that her decision to expose Jessica's manipulation wouldn't just end their friendship, it would become a defining moment that would change how Sarah approached relationships, boundaries, and her own self-worth for the rest of her life. Standing in that hallway in her wedding dress, holding the evidence of her best friend's calculated betrayal, Sarah was about to transform from a woman who avoided conflict and trusted people too easily into someone who understood the importance of protecting herself and standing up for what she deserved. But first, she had to walk back into that ballroom and face 150 people who had just witnessed what they thought was a spontaneous moment of joy. armed with the knowledge that it was actually a premeditated act of selfishness designed to hurt her on the most important day of her life. Sarah spent 10 minutes in the bathroom adjoining the hallway, fixing her makeup and preparing herself mentally for what she was about to do. She looked at herself in the mirror, still wearing her grandmother's pearl hairpins and the wedding dress she had dreamed about for years, and made a decision that would require more courage than she had ever summoned before. Michael and Amanda waited for her outside the bathroom, both offering to support whatever choice she made. But Sarah knew this was something she had to do herself. She had spent too many years avoiding confrontation, letting people treat her poorly to keep the peace, and prioritizing other people's comfort over her own dignity. "I'm going back in there," Sarah told them. "I'm going to play the voicemail for everyone to hear. And then I'm going to finish celebrating my wedding with the people who actually love and respect me." When Sarah walked back into the ballroom, Jessica was still holding court near the head table. Surrounded by guests offering congratulations on her pregnancy, she was glowing with attention, posing for photos and talking animatedly about due dates and baby plans. Several people were taking videos with their phones, capturing Jessica's big moment. The DJ noticed Sarah's return and approached her to ask about music for dancing. Instead, Sarah asked him if she could use his microphone for a moment to address the guests. The DJ, assuming she wanted to thank everyone for attending or make some kind of bride's announcement, readily agreed. Sarah walked to the center of the dance floor, and the DJ lowered the background music to get everyone's attention. Conversations gradually died down as guests realized the bride wanted to speak. "Thank you all so much for being here tonight to celebrate Michael and me," Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom's sound system. "This day has been everything I dreamed it would be, and having all of you here to share it with us means the world to me." Guests smiled and some applauded, expecting a standard bride's thank you speech. Jessica was still standing near the head table, looking pleased and relaxed, probably assuming Sarah was going to acknowledge her pregnancy announcement in some gracious way. "However," Sarah continued, her tone shifting slightly, "something happened tonight that I think you all should know about, because it reveals something important about truth, friendship, and respect." The energy in the room changed. Guests sensed that something unexpected was about to happen, and conversations stopped completely. Jessica's smile faltered slightly, but she probably thought Sarah was going to address the timing of her announcement in some diplomatic way. "A few minutes ago, my maid of honor Jessica announced that she's expecting her first baby," Sarah said, looking directly at Jessica. "Many of you congratulated her on what seemed like spontaneous, joyful news. But I've just learned that Jessica's announcement wasn't spontaneous at all. It was planned, calculated, and motivated by feelings about me and my wedding that I think you should hear in her own words." Jessica's face went white. She suddenly understood what was about to happen, but she was frozen in place, unable to leave without making the situation even more obvious. Sarah pulled out Amanda's phone, which Amanda had given her before she went back into the ballroom. 2 weeks ago, Jessica left a voicemail for our friend Amanda. In that voicemail, she revealed her true feelings about my wedding, our friendship, and her plan to use my reception as the stage for her pregnancy announcement. The ballroom was completely silent now. Even the catering staff had stopped moving. Every guest was focused on Sarah, sensing that they were about to witness something unprecedented. "I'm going to play that voicemail for you now," Sarah said, "because I believe you deserve to know the truth about what just happened here tonight." Jessica finally found her voice. "Sarah, please don't do this," she said, her voice shaking. "Let's talk about this privately." "You didn't want to handle your announcement privately," Sarah replied calmly. "You wanted to make it public, in front of all our friends and family. So now they're going to hear the whole truth." Sarah pressed play on Amanda's phone, and Jessica's drunken, bitter voice filled the ballroom through the sound system. "Amanda, it's Jessica. I know it's late, but I'm just so frustrated, and I needed to talk to someone who would understand. I'm so tired of everything being about Sarah and her perfect wedding. Do you know how exhausting it's been pretending to care about centerpiece heights and whether the napkins match the bridesmaids' dresses? I've spent 18 months of my life helping her plan this wedding, and for what? So she can be the center of attention for one more day? The reaction in the ballroom was immediate and visceral. Guests gasped audibly, and several people looked between Sarah and Jessica with shock and confusion. Jessica's parents, who had traveled from California for the wedding, looked mortified. The voicemail continued, Jessica's slurred voice becoming more venomous. She acts like she's so special because she found Michael and they're getting married, but honestly, it's not that impressive. Plenty of people get married. It doesn't make her better than the rest of us. And all this sustainable wedding nonsense, like she's saving the world by using local flowers. It's so pretentious. Sarah watched as her wedding guests processed what they were hearing. These were people who had just congratulated Jessica on her pregnancy, who had witnessed what they thought was a beautiful moment of friendship and shared joy. Now they were hearing Jessica's true opinion of Sarah, expressed in the cruelest possible terms. The voicemail reached its climax. Well, I have news too, and I'm not going to wait for Sarah to finish being the princess to share it. David and I are having a baby, and I'm going to announce it at her reception. Let's see how she likes sharing the spotlight for once. I've been the supporting character in her story for too long. When the voicemail ended, the silence in the ballroom was deafening. 150 people sat in stunned quiet, processing what they had just heard. The contrast between Jessica's public persona as the devoted maid of honor and her private feelings of resentment and jealousy was so stark that many guests seemed unable to comprehend it. Jessica was crying now, but whether from shame, anger, or embarrassment was unclear. David looked confused and hurt, clearly having had no idea about Jessica's motivations for choosing this moment to announce their pregnancy. Sarah felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. For the first time in hours, she felt like she was in control of her own wedding reception. She had told the truth, exposed the manipulation, and given her guests the context they needed to understand what had really happened. I want you all to know, Sarah continued, her voice steady and clear, that I don't regret playing that voicemail, because I believe friendship should be built on honesty and respect. What Jessica did tonight wasn't a mistake or poor timing. It was a calculated decision to hurt me on my wedding day, motivated by feelings she's apparently been hiding for months or possibly years. Some guests began to murmur among themselves, processing the revelation and probably reconsidering every interaction they'd had with Jessica that evening. I also want you to know, Sarah said, looking around the room at faces of people she loved, that I'm not going to let Jessica's actions define this day. Michael and I are married, we're surrounded by people who truly love and support us, and we're going to continue celebrating that. The applause started slowly, with Sarah's parents and Michael's family, but it quickly spread throughout the ballroom. People began standing up, not just clapping but cheering for Sarah's courage in standing up for herself and her refusal to let Jessica's betrayal ruin her wedding day. Jessica tried to approach Sarah, but several guests, including some who had been congratulating her just minutes earlier, turned away from her or blocked her path. The social dynamics in the room had shifted completely. Jessica had gone from being the center of positive attention to being the person everyone was staring at with disappointment and disgust. David looked mortified and confused. He approached Jessica, and they had a brief, heated conversation before David stormed out of the ballroom. Later, Sarah would learn that David had genuinely thought Jessica's announcement was spontaneous and had been horrified to discover it was part of a calculated plan to upstage Sarah. Jessica finally left the ballroom with her parents, who looked embarrassed and apologetic. As they gathered their belongings, several guests who had previously been friendly with Jessica made pointed efforts to avoid eye contact or conversation. But the most remarkable thing happened after Jessica left. Instead of the evening being ruined by drama and conflict, Sarah's wedding reception transformed into something even more meaningful than she had originally planned. Her guests rallied around her with genuine love and support, creating an atmosphere of authentic celebration that felt more powerful than any carefully planned party could have been. Sarah's father, despite his Parkinson's symptoms, asked the DJ to play "What a Wonderful World" and took Sarah for a father-daughter dance that left no dry eyes in the ballroom. Michael's best man gave an impromptu speech about resilience, love, and the importance of surrounding yourself with people who celebrate your happiness rather than resenting it. The dancing that followed was uninhibited and joyful in a way that surprised everyone. Guests seemed liberated by Sarah's honesty and courage, and the artificial politeness that often characterizes wedding receptions gave way to genuine connection and celebration. Amanda became the unofficial maid of honor for the rest of the evening, helping Sarah with her dress during bathroom breaks and making sure she had water between dances. Other friends stepped up to take photos, coordinate with vendors, and handle details that Jessica was supposed to manage, but the most significant change was in Sarah herself. For the first time in her adult life, she had confronted someone who was treating her poorly instead of avoiding conflict or making excuses for their behavior. She had prioritized her own dignity and happiness over maintaining false peace, and the result was liberating in a way she hadn't expected. As the evening progressed, several guests approached Sarah privately to thank her for her courage and to share their own experiences with manipulative friendships. Many people admitted they had suspected Jessica's motives weren't entirely pure, but hadn't known how to address their concerns. Sarah's mother pulled her aside during a quiet moment to tell her how proud she was of Sarah's strength and self-respect. "I was worried you might spend your whole life letting people walk over you to avoid confrontation," Linda said. "But tonight showed me that you know your own worth and you're willing to fight for it." Michael was amazed by his new wife's transformation. He had always loved Sarah's kindness and tendency to see the best in people, but he had sometimes worried about her inability to set boundaries with people who took advantage of her generosity. Watching Sarah stand up to Jessica with such clarity and strength made him fall in love with her all over again. The wedding reception continued until nearly 1 a.m., with guests lingering much longer than originally planned. The energy remained positive and celebratory, with people talking about how refreshing it had been to witness such authentic communication and how much they admired Sarah's handling of a difficult situation when Sarah and Michael finally returned to their honeymoon suite. Sarah felt exhausted but triumphant. She had successfully defended her wedding day, exposed a toxic friendship, and maintained her dignity throughout the process. More importantly, she had learned something crucial about herself. She was stronger than she had ever realized, and she was capable of standing up for herself when it mattered most. But the real transformation was just beginning. Over the following days, weeks, and months, Sarah would discover that her decision to confront Jessica publicly had changed not just that one evening, but her entire approach to relationships, boundaries, and self-advocacy. The honeymoon in Tuscany was everything Sarah and Michael had hoped it would be, but it was also the first time Sarah had extended period to process what had happened at their wedding reception. Away from the immediate aftermath and surrounded by vineyard views and medieval architecture, Sarah found herself reflecting deeply on the confrontation with Jessica and what it meant for her future. Michael noticed the change in Sarah almost immediately. She seemed more confident, more decisive, and more willing to express her opinions about everything from restaurant choices to itinerary changes. The woman who used to defer to others' preferences and avoid making waves was suddenly comfortable stating what she wanted and advocating for her own interests. "I keep thinking about that voicemail," Sarah told Michael as they sat on their hotel balcony overlooking the Tuscan countryside. "Not just what Jessica said, but how long she must have been feeling that way while pretending to be my best friend. It makes me wonder how many other relationships in my life might be built on false foundations." Michael listened as Sarah worked through her thoughts, supporting her process without trying to rush her to conclusions. He could see that the wedding confrontation had been a catalyst for much deeper self-examination, and he wanted to give her space to grow into whatever insights were emerging. When they returned to Chicago 2 weeks after the wedding, Sarah approached her regular life with a completely different mindset. She started paying attention to patterns in her relationships that she had previously ignored or excused. She noticed which friends consistently turned conversations back to themselves, which colleagues took credit for her ideas, and which family members made her feel guilty for setting boundaries. The first major test of Sarah's new approach came at work. Her colleague Mark had a habit of presenting Sarah's marketing concepts to their boss as his own ideas, something Sarah had always tolerated to avoid workplace conflict. But 3 weeks after returning from her honeymoon, when Mark once again claimed credit for a sustainable fashion campaign Sarah had developed, she decided to address it directly. "Mark," Sarah said calmly during their next team meeting, "I want to clarify that the campaign you just presented was based on research and concepts I developed over the past month. I'm happy to collaborate on projects, but I need proper credit for my contributions." Mark looked surprised and uncomfortable, clearly not expecting Sarah to challenge him publicly. Their boss, Jennifer, asked for clarification, and Sarah provided documentation showing her original concepts and development timeline. "Thank you for clarifying, Sarah," Jennifer said. "Mark, in the future, please make sure you're accurately representing collaborative work and giving credit where it's due." The conversation was brief and professional, but it represented a fundamental shift in how Sarah interacted with people who had previously taken advantage of her reluctance to advocate for herself. Sarah's new approach extended to her personal relationships as well. Her college friend Melissa had a pattern of calling Sarah only when she needed emotional support or professional advice, but never being available when Sarah needed the same support. For years, Sarah had accepted this one-sided dynamic, telling herself that Melissa was just busy or going through a difficult time. But after the wedding revelation about Jessica's true feelings, Sarah decided to test the authenticity of other friendships by paying attention to reciprocity and genuine interest in her well-being. When Melissa called in November asking for Sarah's help networking for a new job, Sarah said, "I'd be happy to help you, but I've realized our friendship has become pretty one-sided. When was the last time you asked me how I'm doing or offered support when I needed it?" Melissa was defensive and claimed she hadn't realized she was being selfish, but she also made no effort to change the pattern of their interactions. Sarah decided to let that friendship fade naturally rather than continuing to invest energy in someone who wasn't willing to be a genuine friend. The most dramatic change came in Sarah's relationship with her extended family. Her cousin Rachel had always been demanding and manipulative, expecting Sarah to drop everything to help with Rachel's various crises while offering no support in return. Rachel had even complained about not being invited to be a bridesmaid in Sarah's wedding, despite having made no effort to maintain a close relationship with Sarah in recent years. During Thanksgiving dinner, just 2 months after the wedding, Rachel started her usual pattern of dominating conversation with stories about her latest relationship drama and expecting everyone to offer advice and sympathy. When she turned to Sarah and demanded, "Don't you think I deserve better than how Brad is treating me?" Sarah's response surprised everyone. "Rachel," Sarah said calmly, "I think you deserve to be treated well, but I also think relationships require mutual effort and respect. From what you've told us, it sounds like you and Brad both have some work to do on communication and boundaries." Rachel was clearly expecting Sarah to validate her victim narrative and condemn Brad without question, as Sarah had always done in the past. When Sarah offered a balanced perspective instead, Rachel became angry and accused Sarah of being unsupportive. "I'm happy to support you," Sarah replied. "But support doesn't mean automatically agreeing with everything you say or taking sides without hearing both perspectives. If you want advice, I'll give you honest advice. If you just want someone to tell you you're always right, you might need to find that somewhere else." The conversation created temporary tension at the family dinner, but several relatives privately thanked Sarah later for finally addressing Rachel's drama-seeking behavior. Sarah's transformation affected her marriage with Michael in entirely positive ways. Michael had always admired Sarah's kindness and generosity, but he had sometimes felt frustrated by her inability to stand up for herself when people took advantage of those qualities. Watching Sarah develop healthy boundaries and self-advocacy skills made their relationship stronger and more balanced. "I feel like I'm married to a different person," Michael told Sarah 6 months after their wedding, but in the best possible way. "You're still kind and generous, but now you're also strong and confident. It's like you finally believe you deserve to be treated well." Sarah's professional life flourished as well. Her willingness to advocate for her ideas and take credit for her work led to increased recognition from her boss and colleagues. She was promoted to senior marketing director 8 months after her wedding, with Jennifer specifically citing Sarah's improved confidence and leadership skills as factors in the decision. But perhaps the most significant change was in Sarah's approach to new friendships. She became much more selective about who she allowed into her inner circle, paying attention to early signs of self-centeredness, manipulation, or lack of reciprocity. She developed what she called friendship probation periods, where she observed potential friends' behavior over several months before deciding whether to invest deeply in the relationship. This selective approach led to deeper, more authentic friendships with people who genuinely valued Sarah for who she was, rather than what she could provide for them. Amanda, who had shown such courage in sharing Jessica's voicemail, became one of Sarah's closest friends. Their friendship was built on mutual respect, honest communication, and genuine care for each other's well-being. Sarah also developed new friendships with colleagues and neighbors who shared her values and demonstrated consistent kindness and reliability. These relationships felt different from her previous friendships because they were based on equality and mutual support rather than Sarah's pattern of giving more than she received. The changes in Sarah's life didn't go unnoticed by people who had previously taken advantage of her accommodating nature. Some responded positively, making efforts to improve their behavior and treat Sarah with more respect. Others became angry or withdrew from the relationship entirely when they realized Sarah was no longer willing to tolerate one-sided dynamics. Jessica made several attempts to reconnect with Sarah in the months following the wedding. She sent text messages, emails, and even showed up at Sarah's workplace once, claiming she wanted to apologize and repair their friendship. But her apologies always included justifications for her behavior and requests for Sarah to move past the incident without acknowledging the depth of her betrayal. Sarah's response was consistent and firm. "Jessica, what you did wasn't a mistake or poor judgment. It was a calculated decision to hurt me on my wedding day, motivated by resentment you'd been hiding for years. Even if I could forgive that, I can't trust someone who is capable of such deception. I wish you well, but our friendship is over." Jessica's attempts to reconnect gradually stopped, and Sarah learned through mutual friends that Jessica and David had broken up 3 months after the wedding. Apparently, David had been disturbed by Jessica's manipulative behavior and her lack of genuine remorse for what she had done to Sarah. A year after her wedding, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. She was happier, more confident, and surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her well-being. Her marriage was strong, her career was thriving, and her relationships were based on mutual respect and authentic connection. The woman who had once avoided conflict at all costs had learned to advocate for herself with grace and strength. The person who used to make excuses for other people's bad behavior now set clear boundaries and maintained them consistently. The friend who once gave endlessly without expecting reciprocation now understood that healthy relationships required balance and mutual investment. But Sarah's transformation had ripple effects beyond her own life. Her courage in confronting Jessica had inspired other people to examine their own relationships and boundaries. Several wedding guests told Sarah that watching her stand up for herself had motivated them to address toxic dynamics in their own lives. Her cousin Rachel eventually apologized for her self-centered behavior and made genuine efforts to be a more considerate family member. Her colleague Mark learned to collaborate more fairly and give proper credit for shared work. Even some of Sarah's more casual friends began treating her with more respect when they realized she would no longer tolerate being taken for granted. The most unexpected outcome was that Sarah's story went viral on social media. Someone had recorded part of her confrontation with Jessica, and the video spread across platforms with millions of views and thousands of comments from people sharing their own experiences with manipulative friends and toxic relationships. Sarah received hundreds of messages from people thanking her for showing them that it was possible to stand up for themselves while maintaining their dignity. Many people said her example had given them the courage to address similar situations in their own lives. Rather than feeling violated by the unwanted attention, Sarah decided to use the platform constructively. She started a blog about healthy relationships, boundary setting, and authentic friendship that gained a substantial following. She eventually began speaking at workshops and conferences about recognizing and addressing toxic relationship patterns. 2 years after her wedding, Sarah had built a completely different life than the one she had been living before Jessica's betrayal. She was stronger, happier, more successful, and surrounded by genuine relationships based on mutual respect and authentic connection. The transformation that began with a voicemail, played at a wedding reception, had evolved into a fundamental change in how Sarah understood her own worth and what she deserved from the people in her life. She had learned that avoiding conflict doesn't preserve relationships, it preserves dysfunction. She had discovered that standing up for yourself doesn't make you selfish, it makes you self-respecting. Most importantly, Sarah had realized that the people who truly love you will support your boundaries and respect your needs, while the people who become angry when you advocate for yourself were probably taking advantage of your kindness all along. 3 years after that transformational wedding night in Chicago, Sarah Mitchell Thompson stood in front of 200 people at a women's leadership conference in San Francisco, sharing the story that had changed not just her own life, but the lives of countless others who had heard it and found the courage to transform their own relationships. "The night I played that voicemail at my wedding reception," Sarah told the audience, "I thought I was just defending my wedding day. I had no idea I was actually defending my entire future happiness." The audience was completely engaged, leaning forward to catch every word as Sarah continued. "Looking back now, I can see that Jessica's betrayal wasn't the real problem. The real problem was that I had spent 28 years of my life accepting treatment that was far below what I deserved. And I had trained people to see me as someone whose needs and feelings didn't matter as much as their own." Sarah had learned to tell her story with both vulnerability and strength, helping people understand not just what had happened to her, but what it revealed about patterns that many people struggle with in their own relationships. "The first lesson I learned," Sarah said, "is that authentic friendship requires reciprocity. Real friends don't just take your support when they need it, they offer support when you need it. They don't just share their good news with you, they genuinely celebrate your good news without trying to overshadow it. They don't just expect you to accommodate their needs, they consider your needs when making decisions that affect you." She paused, letting that sink in before continuing. "For years, I thought being a good friend meant always being available, always being supportive, and never asking for anything in return. But that's not friendship, that's servitude. And it doesn't actually help the other person become a better friend or a better person." The second lesson Sarah shared was about the difference between kindness and people-pleasing. "I used to think I was being kind by avoiding conflict and letting people treat me poorly. But actually, I was being dishonest. I was teaching people that they could disrespect me without consequences. And I was building relationships based on false foundations." Sarah explained how she had learned to distinguish between accommodation that comes from genuine generosity and accommodation that comes from fear of conflict or rejection. When you're truly kind, you can set boundaries with love. When you're people-pleasing, you can't set boundaries at all because your sense of worth depends on other people's approval. The third lesson was about the importance of paying attention to patterns rather than isolated incidents. "Jessica's pregnancy announcement at my wedding wasn't an anomaly," Sarah explained. "When I looked back honestly, I could see that she had a history of centering herself in other people's important moments. I had ignored those patterns because I wanted to believe the best about someone I loved." Sarah encouraged the audience to examine their own relationships for recurring patterns of behavior that made them feel unappreciated, taken for granted, or emotionally drained. People show you who they are through their consistent actions over time, not through their words or their occasional gestures. Trust the patterns, not the exceptions. The fourth lesson Sarah shared was about the transformative power of truth-telling, even when it's difficult. "Playing that voicemail at my wedding was the scariest thing I had ever done, but it was also the most liberating. For the first time in my adult life, I prioritized my own truth over someone else's comfort, and it changed everything about how I saw myself and my relationships." She acknowledged that confronting toxic behavior isn't always safe or advisable, but emphasized the importance of at least being honest with yourself about what's happening in your relationships. You don't always have to confront the person who's mistreating you, but you do have to stop making excuses for their behavior and start making choices that protect your well-being. The fifth and most important lesson Sarah shared was about self-worth and the standards you set for how people treat you. The most shocking thing about my story isn't that Jessica was jealous and manipulative, she said. The most shocking thing is that I had been accepting substandard treatment from people for so long that I didn't even recognize it as abnormal until someone showed me explicit evidence of their disrespect, Sarah explained. How learning to value herself had transformed every aspect of her life, from her marriage to her career to her friendships. When you truly believe you deserve to be treated well, you stop making excuses for people who treat you poorly. You stop giving endless second chances to people who repeatedly disappoint you. You stop sacrificing your own needs to accommodate people who would never do the same for you. She emphasized that this transformation didn't happen overnight and required ongoing effort and self-reflection. Learning to set boundaries and advocate for yourself is a skill, just like learning to play piano or speak a foreign language. It takes practice, and you'll make mistakes, but you'll get better over time. Sarah also addressed the fear that many people have about losing relationships when they start setting boundaries. Yes, some people will be upset when you stop letting them take advantage of you. Some relationships will end when you start requiring reciprocity and respect. But those relationships were already unhealthy and unsustainable. Losing them makes room for better relationships with people who actually value you. The response to Sarah's presentations was always overwhelming. People approached her afterward, sharing their own stories of toxic friendships, manipulative family members, and workplace situations where they felt taken advantage of. Many people said that hearing Sarah's story had given them permission to trust their own instincts about relationships that felt one-sided or emotionally draining. Sarah had also written a book about her experience, titled The Voicemail That Changed Everything: Learning to Value Yourself in a World That Takes Advantage of Your Kindness. The book had become a bestseller, resonating with readers who recognized their own patterns in Sarah's story. But perhaps the most meaningful outcome of Sarah's transformation was the example it had set for other people in her life. Her younger sister Emma, who was naturally more assertive than Sarah, told her that watching Sarah's journey had taught her the difference between healthy assertiveness and aggressive behavior. Michael's younger brother Jake said that Sarah's wedding confrontation had inspired him to address bullying behavior from his college roommates instead of just enduring it to keep the peace. Several of Sarah's colleagues had started speaking up in meetings instead of letting louder voices dominate every conversation. Even Sarah's mother, Linda, had been inspired by her daughter's transformation. Linda had always been someone who prioritized family harmony over individual needs, but watching Sarah set boundaries with Rachel and other demanding family members had encouraged Linda to start advocating for herself in her own relationships. The ripple effects continued to spread. Amanda, who had shown such courage in sharing Jessica's voicemail, had developed her own workshop about recognizing manipulation in friendships. She often presented alongside Sarah at conferences, sharing the perspective of the friend who has to decide whether to reveal uncomfortable truths about mutual acquaintances. 3 years later, Sarah's life looked completely different than it had before her wedding day confrontation. She was successful in her career, happily married, surrounded by authentic friendships, and had become a voice for people learning to value themselves in their relationships. But the most significant change was internal. Sarah had developed an unshakable sense of her own worth that wasn't dependent on other people's approval or validation. She had learned to trust her instincts about people's character and motivations. She had mastered the skill of setting boundaries with love while maintaining her essential kindness and generosity. The woman who stood in that ballroom 3 years ago, playing a voicemail about her best friend's betrayal. Sarah concluded her conference presentation, was desperate to defend her wedding day. But what she actually did was defend her right to be treated with respect and dignity in all her relationships. That defense changed everything. As Sarah looked out at the audience of women who were learning to advocate for themselves and value their own needs, she felt grateful for Jessica's betrayal in a way she never could have imagined. Without that shocking wake-up call, Sarah might have spent decades more accepting substandard treatment and wondering why her relationships never felt truly fulfilling. The key voicemail that was meant to reveal Jessica's cruelty had actually revealed Sarah's strength. The wedding day that was supposed to be ruined by drama had become the foundation for a completely transformed life. The friendship that ended in betrayal had made room for relationships built on mutual respect and authentic connection. Sarah's story had become a powerful reminder that sometimes the most painful experiences in our lives are also the most transformative ones, and that learning to value yourself is the greatest gift you can give, not just to yourself, but to everyone who loves you authentically. As women in the audience wiped away tears and made notes about boundaries they needed to set in their own lives, Sarah knew that Jessica's voicemail had accomplished something far more important than destroying a wedding reception. It had created a catalyst for transformation that would continue rippling outward, inspiring people to examine their relationships, trust their instincts, and demand the respect and love they deserved. The most beautiful irony of all was that in trying to diminish Sarah on her wedding day, Jessica had actually helped her discover her own power, strength, and worth in a way that would benefit her for the rest of her life. If you found inspiration in Sarah's story of transformation and self-advocacy, please subscribe to our channel for more stories about real people overcoming challenges and learning to value themselves. Like this video if it resonated with you, and share in the comments about a time when you had to stand up for yourself in a difficult relationship. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to find their own courage. Thank you for watching, and remember that you deserve to be treated with respect and kindness in all your relationships.